Thank you for joining me again today. We've been studying resurrection and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And this week we finish up by looking at something rather different again. What sort of body will we have when we're resurrected? Paul puts it like this, 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 35. But someone may ask, how are the dead raised? What kind of body will they come with? Well, Paul says, how foolish. But just a minute. Isn't it true that some of us always want to know what's going to happen in the future? We're always asking, well, what's next? What's next? What's going on? And it happens in every sort of walk of life. I referee soccer in September and October in different schools. And there's always some boy who's asking me, Ref, how long to go? Sometimes I respond and say, well, who cares? Why don't you just get on with playing soccer? And they look at me as though I have two heads. But it doesn't matter to them how long. All they've got to do is play the game, and I'll blow the whistle when it's over. But I've got to know. I've got to know the future. And that really goes through the whole of mankind. We must know what's going to happen. So here's the question coming. And maybe it was a real question from the people in Corinth. Some will say, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body will they come? You see, this is why there's so much in the occult today, why so many are getting involved in reading the future, fortune telling, cards. I want to know what's going to happen. I want someone to tell me. And if this person down the road will tell me, I'll go and pay them a fee. And they forget that the source that they're going to is the devil himself. That is satanic. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that the things they tell you don't happen. The fact is they do. And the moment one thing happens, friend, they've caught you hook, line, and sinker. And from then on, you believe everything else they said. You go to a fortune teller and you leave there and something begins to happen that they've said, and immediately your mind goes back to everything else that was said, and you're thinking about it and you're chewing on it, and you are absolutely sucked in. And that's what happens. But that's human nature, especially unredeemed human nature. Well, what's it going to be like? What's going to happen? And we keep on asking. And so here's the question even about resurrection. Well, what sort of body will it be? And in our studies, particularly around Easter time, it always comes up in a Bible study group. Well, what sort of body will we have? Well, Paul says, how foolish. We don't really know. I think we can say this. It's going to be a body like the resurrected Jesus had, which was not subject to the limitations that ours are subject to. He could appear and disappear at will. He was here and then he was there. Travel didn't seem to be any problem to him. It was a different type of body, obviously, because it was a body that was suited for the resurrected life, not the life we have here on earth. And so what Paul is saying in this whole paragraph is, God gives us the type of body that's needed for the type of life. And the body we have, I have a feeling, is to live on this earth. And therefore, if mankind decides to live on the moon or somewhere else, he may well face some problems, because the body was not designed for there, it was designed for here. And I think sometimes man just wants to take that extra step, show how clever he is, and do something totally different. Well, that's all very pretty, but remember that our bodies are restricted to this life. And so if we're going to have eternal life, we're going to need new bodies. And so he goes on and says in verse 36, how foolish! What you sow does not come to life until it dies. When you sow, you do not put the plant, the body that will be, but just a seed, perhaps of wheat or of something else. Now, if you're a gardener and listening to this, you appreciate exactly what Paul says. When we come round to the vegetable time, we're going to put all sorts of seeds in our ground, but you don't go out there and put a line of lettuce in, do you? You put a line of lettuce seeds in. We say, no, I didn't. I put them in a box first. Yes, but you still put seeds in. And if you look at those seeds, they're deadly little things, aren't they? I mean, they are literally dead. You take a look at them and you say, well, this is ridiculous. They got this hard shell. What's inside? Well, it's a potential of life. So you put it into the ground, and the ground feeds it, and then there's water, and then there's heat, The next thing is, up comes a plant. What has happened? Well, the seed died so that the plant could live. And it's exactly the same with you and me. If we're to have that resurrected life, then this old shell has to die. Our body, the bit that we've been carrying around for X number of years, that dies. And when that dies, one day out of that death will come new life, a resurrected life with a resurrected body. That's the whole logic of what Paul's saying here. And then he goes on and says, but God gives it a body as he determined, and to each kind of seed he gives its own body. You would be a little shocked, wouldn't you, if you put in a very nice line of lettuce seeds and up came cucumbers? Well, you say, Richard, nature isn't like that. No, God isn't like that. God doesn't do that sort of thing. God is extremely orderly in everything that he does. It's Christians who are sometimes disorderly and get things all muddled up. Our God doesn't. And everything has a body suited for what it does. Whether you talk about the plant kingdom or the animal kingdom, right through this world, you can take this and see how it works out. Verse 39, all flesh is not the same. Men have one kind of flesh, animals another, birds another, fish another. Now, if you're an evolutionist listening to my voice, you may have a little problem with that verse. I'm not sure how you work it out, but I can see how our God works it out. He created each thing differently. He created each thing according to the environment in which it would be. The fish would be in the sea, so it had scales, or some other sort of flesh. The bird's going to fly, so it needs feathers. But all of it is different according to its purpose. And mankind is different again according to the purpose that God has given. And therefore, if man starts flying, he can have all sorts of problems. If you try to swim too long, you can also have all sorts of problems, because that's not the way the body was made. Verse 40. There are also heavenly bodies, and there are earthly bodies. But the splendor of the heavenly bodies is one kind, and the splendor of the earthly bodies is another. Isn't it true sometimes we look up at the stars, and the sky is so clear, it is absolutely magnificent? You get a really clear evening, especially if there's a little bit of frost, and you can see those heavenly bodies, and they are majestic. Now, what about earthly bodies? Well, you say, I don't like to look at mine very much. Well, for some of us, that's understandable. But look at the working of your body. It is absolutely magnificent. We had a man in hospital in October, and I was visiting quite frequently because he was very, very sick. And I was intrigued to listen to the doctors talking to his wife one day. He had had a heart problem. With the heart problem, he had a lung problem. With the lung problem, liquid had built up. And as you listen to the doctors, you found how every function was interwoven with the other function, because that's how God has made our body. And the doctor said he dealt with the respiratory system. He said once the heart condition is cleared up, then the breathing will be fine. And he explained all that. You see, God has put our bodies together in such a magnificent way. You don't believe me? All right. Pick up a little newborn baby and take a look at what you see. Not only do you see something very wonderfully made, but you see such a great potential, a potential for life. But by the way, just check how beautifully the Lord our God made that little one. Everything's there. Everything's ready to go. Look at those fingernails. Look at those toenails. Magnificent. Lord, you do such neat work. Well, he said that's the body they need. But then you look at a plant and something totally different. That's exactly what Paul's saying to us here. Verse 41. He says, the sun has one kind of splendor, the moon another, the stars another, and stars different, and star differs from star in splendor. That's fascinating too, isn't it? We can't look fully at the sun, it's just too bright in its radiance. But a sunny day, and it's magnificent. And we've had some gorgeous fall days. I always laugh, you know. People are so wonderful at this. The only days I remember were the bad ones. That's a little negative spirit there. Oh, I don't remember days like this. It's been foggy all the time. Friend, you haven't seen a good fog. In England, we have the real stuff. In Los Angeles, they have the real thing. We've had some beautiful days. And one or two evenings, my wife and I have been driving to Bible study in Huntingdon Valley, and we've looked over to the west, and the sky has been absolutely magnificent. So clear, the colors, you see the different colors from the sky above you right down to the horizon. Magnificent. When our Lord does a picture, he does such a beautiful job, and every color blends. That's our God. That's the splendor, that's the beauty. But then I look at the moon, and it's totally different from the sun, and yet it has its own majesty, it has its own splendor, it has its own beauty, but it's totally different. And then the stars are different again, and we can't see them too clearly, not like the moon. You see the moon on a very clear night, and you can look right at it, and it is just beautiful in its own sense, especially if you're at the shore and watch it come up over the horizon, just like one big enormous cheese. Well, what's all this saying? Well, simply this. We have a body at this time that is suitable to dwell on this earth. That's the way God made it. That's the way God wanted it. That is God's design for us. One day we'll have a different body. It will be a resurrected body, and that will be for a resurrected life. You say, just a minute, Richard, where will that be? I don't know, but I do know this. When John saw his revelation in that vision, he saw a new heaven and a new earth. And I think it's very probable that the Lord our God will take this earth and make it totally new. And when he's made it totally new, he'll give us new bodies to dwell here. And we'll be perfectly comfortable because the body he's given us will be suitable for the environment. That's the way our God works. And once we understand that, we can relax. We don't have to be asking all the time, Lord, what sort of body have you got for me? What are you going to do for me? We know that he's going to temper it according to the life that he's going to give us. Yes, we have everlasting life in Jesus Christ. Yes, we will be raised from the dead. Yes, we will receive a body. And we'll receive a body that is absolutely perfect and suitable for the life that God has arranged for us. And in that we can rest. The trouble is we're so curious as human beings, and we always want to know a bit more. Lord, what have you got in mind? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And Paul's saying, how foolish. Just rest in the wonder of your Lord. Know that he's got all things worked out, and all things will work out for good. And then you can just relax in that. One day, if you belong to Jesus, you'll have a resurrected body as well.